Hello students, welcome to the channel. Today we go through a reading passage. This is the second passage from the October 16, 2019 PSAT. This is a social science passage. So let's begin. This passage is adapted from Daniel Pink to Cell is Human, the surprising truth about moving others. The notion that extroverts, people who are very outgoing and talkative, are the finest salespeople is so obvious that we have overlooked one teensy flaw. There's almost no evidence that it's actually true. So, from the blur, we notice that the passage is going to talk about selling, right? And it says to sell is human. And when you say moving others, moving here is to kind of get someone to do something, right? I was impressed by his sales pitch. I was affected by his sales pitch, something like that. And the first paragraph introduces the concept of extroverts, which is, people who are outgoing, who are gregarious, who are talkative. And it is assumed that these people would make the best salespersons, but there's no evidence for that. When social scientists have investigated the relationship between extraversion and sales success, they have found the link at best flimsy. For instance, while supervisors often give extroverts high ratings, several researchers have found that extraversion has no statistically significant relationship with sales performance and that extraversion is not related to sales volume. So this kind of gives us some data that actually undermines this common assumption that extroverts would be great salespersons. So one aspect of that data is that businesses normally give higher ratings to extroverts, but there is no statistically significant correlation between extraversion and sales performance. One of the most comprehensive investigations, a set of 3 meta-analysis of 35 separate studies involving 3,806 salespersons, found that the correlation between extraversion and sales was essentially non-existent. Positive correlations are measured on a scale that goes from 0 to 1, with higher numbers like 0.62 indicate close correlation and 0, no correlation at all. Across the 35 studies, the correlation between extraversion and sales performance was a minuscule 0.07. So we have the data, and that data shows that there is very little correlation between extraversion and sales performance. Does this mean that introverts, those soft-spoken souls more at home in a study corral than at a party, are better at moving others? Not at all. In fact, the evidence which is emerging in new research reveals something far more intriguing. So if the extroverts are not good salespersons, does that mean the introverts are? The author says, no, that's not true either. And there is some new results that are emerging, new intriguing results that are emerging from studies in this area. Adam Grant is a management professor at the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School and one of America's top young social psychologists. Some of his previous research had examined extraversion, and he had become curious that a trait so widely associated with sales didn't have much connection to success in that realm. So he decided to find out why. Grant collected data from a software company that operates call centers to sell its products. He began by asking more than 300 sales representatives to complete several personality assessments, including one that social scientists use to measure where people fall on the introversion-extraversion spectrum. This particular assessment lists statements such as, I'm the life of the party and I'm quiet around strangers, and asks participants to rate themselves on a 1 to 7 scale, with their answers resulting in a numerical measure of extraversion. Then Grant tracked the sales representatives' revenues over the next 3 months, right? So basically, Adam Grant, who is a social psychologist, decided to conduct a study where he wanted to understand the sales performance of different sales executives at a call center And he asked these sales executives to first rate themselves on a number of personality tests to get a sense of how they perceive themselves in terms of extroverts versus introverts. Perhaps not surprisingly, introverted sales reps didn't perform as well as extroverted ones, earning an average of $120 per hour in revenue compared with $125 per hour for their more outgoing colleagues. But neither did nearly as well as the third group, the ambiverts. Ambiverts. These are people who are neither overly extroverted nor wildly introverted. Go back to that 1 to 7 introversion extroversion scale. Ambiverts sit roughly in the center. They are not ones or twos, but they're not sixes or sevens. In Grant's study, these Goldilocks personalities, not too hot, not too cold, earned an average of nearly $155 per hour, easily besting their counterparts. In fact, the salespeople who had the highest average revenue, $208 per hour, had extraversion scores between 4 and 4.5, smack at the midpoint. So this presents the surprising finding that was alluded to earlier, that there is this third kind of people who are called ambiverts, who are neither introverts nor extroverts, but fall somewhere in the middle. And they were the best salespeople as measured by the revenue that they brought. These findings call into question the long-standing belief that the most productive salespeople people are extroverted. Grant writes, according to a large study of European American customers, the most destructive behavior of salespeople wasn't being ill-informed. It was an excess of assertiveness and zeal that led to contacting customers too frequently. Extroverts, in other words, often stumble over themselves. They can talk too much and listen too little, which dulls their understanding of others' perspectives. They can fail to strike the proper balance between asserting and holding back, which can be read as pushy and drive people away. So this paragraph kind of tries to explain why extroversion is not correlated with higher sales numbers, because it is, for a customer, it is quite irritating to get repeated emails or repeated calls, which could be the case if an extroverted salesperson is trying to sell you something, right? They are too interested in selling rather than listening to what the customer wants, and that can sometimes lead to poor outcomes. And then we have this graph which says that this is the extroversion scale, and you can see that the sales revenue are the highest in the middle, right? It's like a parabolic graph. So that was a pretty straightforward passage, I think. Let's go to the questions. The primary purpose of the passage is to propose a theory that accounts for a recent trend in a profession, present several hypotheses about the existence of a new personality type, describe research that undermines a popular belief about a profession, summarize findings that challenge a controversial study about a personality type. Okay, so I like C, right? So let me put C first, and then we can discuss. So because it does describe research that undermines, that weakens a popular belief, right? The popular belief being that extroverts would be the best salespeople. And then there is research presented in the passage that shows that no, they actually aren't. So that's a good answer. Option A, propose a theory that accounts for a recent trend. I don't think the time factor, the recent trend, is something that is brought up in the passage, right? It's not about the fact that ambiverts have recently started selling more, right? So I don't like A. Present several hypotheses about the existence of a new personality type. There aren't several hypotheses presented, right? There is only one research described. So B is not correct. And these summarize findings that challenge a controversial study about a personality type. I don't like the word controversial. That makes it seem extreme. It's not that Grant's study was controversial and other social psychologists raised questions about it. So yeah, and also it's the findings kind of don't challenge that study, right? The findings kind of present a new view of personality types. So I like C. As used in line 2, finest most nearly means. So if you look at line 2, the notion that extroverts are the finest salespeople. So finest in this context would mean the best salespeople, the salespeople who are most effective at bringing in revenue. So purest, subtlest, ablest, fanciest. So I'll go with C, right? They are the most able. They're the best at bringing revenue. It's not about purity. We're not discussing purity here, and we're not discussing subtlety here. Subtlety is being nuanced, right? So that doesn't go with the context of the passage. And we're not talking about being fancy either. So C is the best answer. The parenthetical statements in line 17 to 22, positive mainly serve to. So positive correlations are measured on a scale that goes from 0 to 1, with higher numbers indicating close correlations. Right, so this is kind of giving statistical information and describing important information that helps you understand data, right? So provide quantitative information to emphasize a finding presented earlier. Clarify why experts found a small positive correlation between sales performance and personality type. Distinguish between the scale used for the 3 meta-analysis discussed earlier and the scale used in Grant study, and explain how researchers compiled data to calculate statistical values reported in the study. So I'll go with A, right? Because the whole purpose of that parenthetical information is to provide information, quantitative information to suggest that there is little link between extroversion and sales performance, right? The correlation between the two is a very tiny 0.07. So A is a good answer. Clarify why experts found a small correlation. The why experts found is not correct. Those lines do not discuss the reason for why extroversion and sales performance may be not connected. That is something the last paragraph discusses. So B is out. Distinguish between the scale used for the 3 meta-analysis and the scale used in grants. That's not the point at all. We are not even talking about grant yet. So the idea of distinguishing between one and the other is not something that is needed at this point. And explain how researchers compile the data. The how researchers compile the data is not discussed here, right? It's not about what they did, how they went about compiling the data. The details of their experiment are not given, only the results. So you see options B and D were wrong because they were trying to answer questions that these lines don't answer, right? So that's an important thing to remember. As used in line 25, moving most nearly means. Yeah, that's an interesting word because even in the blurb, when we came across the word moving, it was, I mean, you'd think of moving as something that is emotionally, emotionally charged, right? I was moved by that scene in the movie. But here, I think it is used to kind of get somebody to buy something, right? To make an impression. So does this mean that introverts are better at moving others? So persuading, advancing, transporting, and vacating. So obviously A, right? Because here the context is about convincing somebody to buy a product, right? So that's persuading. Advancing, transporting, and vacating. They don't meet the context of getting somebody to buy something. The perspective adopted by the author in line 55 is best characterized as that of, and see, ambiverts, right? This is a very common question type on the SAT where they kind of present information in a way that is very approachable. That is something that any lay person without a scientific background would understand because it's very conversational. Like, they introduce a new word, ambiverts, and then they say ambiverts because it's new. It's not, you're not expected to know it. You're not a scientist yourself as the reader. So research is that of a researcher who questions the validity of a finding, general reader who is presented with an unfamiliar term, social historian who investigates the origin of a term, scientist who formulates a hypothesis about a phenomenon. So the answer here is a very obvious B, that you come across a word and you've never heard it, and you would approach the passage as you would, as any general reader would. And so you think of this as the kind of response that a general reader would have to a word like ambiverts. So the writer is not adopting the perspective of a researcher who's questioning the validity. He's not questioning the validity. He's kind of surprised at this new word, right? An unfamiliar term, which is what B is saying. He's not looking at the origin of the term, right? He's just kind of describing this term and presenting what it stands for. And he's not formulating a hypothesis. So it's just as a reader who has been presented with a new term. Okay, which choice best supports Grant's claims in lines 67 to 69? 67 to 69. These findings call into question the long-standing belief that the most productive salespeople are extroverted, right? So which choice? Okay, so I'm just going to write down these numbers here. 49 to 52, 57 to 59, 59 to 60, and 60 to 63. So we are supposed to find the best evidence for when Grant says that these findings challenge the view that extroversion and sales performance are closely related. So 49 to 52 says, perhaps not surprisingly, introverted sales reps didn't perform as well as extroverted ones, earning an average of $120 per hour. So that's about introverted. So that's not correct. 57, 57. Go back to that. Ambiverts sit roughly in the center. This just describe what ambiverts do. So that is not relevant. 59 to 60, they're not ones or twos. That's not relevant either. In Grant's study, these personalities earned an average of nearly $155 per hour, easily besting their counterparts. So it's the final option that kind of presents evidence for, it's the final choice, the final 60 to 63, which provides evidence for why extroverts may not be the best salespersons. Okay, that was 15, yeah. Based on the passage, which choice best describes the relationship between Grant's study and the study of European and American customers presented in the last paragraph? So, according to a large study, so this study was, I think it was more qualitative because it was looking at the kind of behavior that customers don't like. So it kind of provides a qualitative support for what Grant found experimentally, right? So the study of customers offers a more detailed analysis of the scale used in Grant's study. The study of customers shows research on personality types excluded by Grant's study. Study of customer challenges the method used to assess extroversion in Grant's study. The study of customers helps to account for the findings in Grant's study, right? So it's very clearly D. It kind of gives you a reason for why extroverts may not be the best salespersons. So here D is a very obvious answer. I don't think we need to discuss the other options because there's no confusion here about the support that this study is giving to Grant's research. Okay, according to the graph, the amount of revenue generated by salespersons with an extroversion rating of 7 was within which interval? So 7, it was between 10 to 12,000, right? For 3 months. Yeah, between 10 to 12,000. So that is option B. The passage best supports which statement about salespeople, such as those who generated average revenues of approximately 15,000 or more over 3 months, as shown in the graph. Yeah, so it's basically the ambiverts, right? The ambiverts are the ones who are in the middle of the scale. So many social scientists mistakenly regard such salespeople as less persuasive than those who are ambiverts. They are the ambiverts, right? Above 15,000. Yeah, so A doesn't make sense. Many customers mistakenly regard such salespeople as less knowledgeable than those who are more introverted. Okay, many supervisors mistakenly regard such salespeople as less effective than those who are very outgoing. Yeah, that seems good. Many salespeople mistakenly regard such colleagues as less diligent than those who are more extroverted. No, so it has to be C because there was this a very specific statement that supervisors often give extroverts high ratings, right? The While supervisors often give extroverts high ratings, several researchers have found that extroversion has no statistically significant relationship with sales performance, right? So I'm looking at line numbers 6, 7. I'm looking at line 7 to 10. Yeah, line 7 to 12, right? Line 7 to 12 is, I would say, is the best evidence for what we are looking at, because the supervisors, they mistakenly regard the ambiverts to be less effective than those who are very outgoing. And so the extroverts are the ones who get the best ratings always, right? Option A, it's not, they are the ambiverts themselves, right? So that doesn't make sense, right? You cannot compare ambiverts with ambiverts and say they're less persuasive. So A is out. Option B, many customers mistakenly regard such people as, so we are not looking at what customers, we know that customers are okay with a little less knowledge, but they're not okay with repeatedly calling them and getting after them, right? So that has got nothing to do with the scale here. So B is not relevant. C is actually relevant because the scale captures extroversion, right? So that's why it's the best answer. And diligence is not something the passage brings up. So yeah. Right. So that was the social science passage. Hope this exercise was useful. If it was, hit like and subscribe to the channel. Let me know what other videos you'd like me to upload, and I'll try and upload those. I'll see you guys in a new video soon. Take care. Bye-bye.